The dress was blue as a summer sky, spread across her lap like something from another world. And when Mason Cole rode up to the small weathered house on the edge of Sierra City, California, he could see through the open doorway a woman bent over the fabric with needle and thread, her fingers moving with practiced precision, despite the rough calluses that marked them as working hands. It was September of 1878, and the afternoon sun slanted through the pine trees that surrounded the modest dwelling, casting long shadows across the dusty ground where his horse stamped and shifted beneath him. He had come looking for work, nothing more. The foreman at the lumber mill had mentioned that Widow Turner's place needed repairs before winter set in, fences mended and roof patches done. And Mason had been drifting through these Sierra Nevada foothills long enough to know he needed to settle somewhere before the first snow. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud, and approached the open door with his hat in his hands. "Madam," he called out, staying a respectful distance from the threshold. The woman looked up, and Mason felt something shift inside his chest. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid and eyes the color of creek stones, gray-green and watchful. Her face was pretty in an unadorned way, sun-touched and honest, but there was a wariness in her expression that spoke of hardship. "Can I help you?" she asked, setting down her sewing but keeping her hands on it as though she might need to protect it. "Name is Mason Cole. The foreman at the mill, Jack Henderson, said you might need some work done around your place. Fences, roof repairs, that sort of thing. I am good with my hands, and I do not charge more than what is fair." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his dusty trail clothes, the worn but well-maintained gun belt at his hip, the lines around his eyes that suggested he was somewhere in his mid-20s. "Beatrice Turner," she finally said. "And Jack was right, I do need help, but I cannot pay much." "I will work for meals and whatever you can spare," Mason replied. "I am not looking to rob anybody." Something in her posture relaxed slightly. "All right then. You can start with the fence along the western side. Posts are rotting through, and the whole thing is about to fall over. There are tools in the shed behind the house." Mason nodded and turned to go, but something made him pause. "That is a beautiful dress you are working on," he said, gesturing toward the blue fabric in her lap. Beatrice's expression changed, becoming something softer and sadder all at once. She looked down at the dress and ran her fingers along the stitching. "It is nothing," she said quietly. "Just something to pass the time. Looks like more than nothing to me. Looks like something special." She met his eyes then, and he saw a flicker of defiance mixed with vulnerability. "It is a ball gown," she said, "like the ladies wear in San Francisco. I have never been to San Francisco. I have never been to a ball. I will never have occasion to wear a dress like this." She lifted her chin slightly. "But a girl can dream, cannot she?" Mason felt those words settle into him like stones dropping into a well. He understood dreams, understood the ache of wanting something that seemed impossibly out of reach. "Yes, madam," he said softly. "I reckon she can." He spent the rest of that afternoon replacing fence posts, digging out the rotted wood and setting new ones deep into the rocky soil. The work was hard and honest, and it felt good to be doing something useful. Beatrice brought him water once, appearing silently at his elbow with a tin cup and a ladle, and he thanked her before drinking deeply. She did not linger, just nodded and returned to the house, but he was aware of her presence like a warm light in a window. Over the next several days, Mason worked his way through the repairs. He patched holes in the roof where winter rains would have come through, replaced broken boards on the porch, and reinforced the shed where Beatrice kept her small collection of chickens. She fed him simple but good meals, bread and stew and sometimes bacon if she had it, and they fell into an easy pattern of companionable near silence. But Mason found himself increasingly curious about her. The house showed signs of a man's presence, work boots by the door that were too large for her feet, a pipe on the mantel, but there was dust on these things, the dust of disuse and absence. Widow Turner. Jack had called her, and Mason did not pry, but he wondered. It was nearly a week before Beatrice spoke to him about anything more than the work. He was on the porch, replacing a rotten board, when she came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat down on the step beside where he was kneeling. The evening was coming on, the sky turning pink and gold over the mountains. "My husband died 18 months ago," she said without preamble. "Logging accident up at the camp. A widow-maker, they called it, a broken branch that fell from above. He never knew what hit him." Mason stopped working and sat back on his heels. "I am sorry," he said, and meant it. Beatrice nodded, staring out at the trees. "We were married 3 years. We came out here from Ohio with dreams of making something of ourselves. Peter was a good man. He worked hard. And then he was gone, and I was left with this place and debts I am still trying to pay off." She took a sip of her coffee. "The dress, the blue one, I started it 2 years ago. Peter said we would go to San Francisco one day, that he would take me to a real fancy ball. I was making it for that. But then he died, and I put it away for months. When I took it out again, I knew I would never wear it, but I could not bring myself to stop working on it." "Does that sound foolish?" "No," Mason said firmly. "It does not sound foolish at all. It sounds like holding on to hope." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared understanding. "You have lost someone too," she said. It was not a question. Mason nodded slowly. "My parents. Cholera when I was 17. My sister too. I have been drifting ever since, 8 years now, looking for something I cannot quite name." "Maybe you are looking for a place to belong," Beatrice said softly. "Maybe," Mason agreed, though he was beginning to think it was not just a place he was looking for, but a person. As September turned into October, the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, and Mason found reasons to stay. He built Beatrice a proper woodshed and filled it with cut logs for the cold months ahead. He repaired her wagon wheel and checked the shoes on her old mare. And in the evenings, after supper, they would sit on the porch together and talk. Beatrice told him about growing up in Ohio, about her mother who had been a seamstress and taught her to sew, about the books she loved to read when she could get her hands on them. Mason told her about his childhood in Missouri, about learning to rope and ride from his father who had been a ranch hand, about the years he had spent drifting from town to town, working odd jobs and never quite settling. "Why did you keep moving?" Beatrice asked one evening, wrapped in a shawl against the October chill. Mason was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think I was running from the grief," he admitted. "As long as I kept moving, I did not have to feel it, but the grief followed me anyway. It always does." "And now?" she asked. "Are you still running?" He met her eyes, seeing the way the lamplight from inside the house illuminated her face, casting soft shadows. "No," he said honestly. "I do not think I am." Something shifted between them after that conversation. The air seemed charged with possibility, with the electric awareness of 2 people drawn to each other, but not yet willing to name it. Mason found himself noticing the way Beatrice tucked a stray hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the sound of her humming while she worked in the garden, the rare but radiant quality of her smile when something genuinely pleased her. And Beatrice, for her part, began to notice Mason in ways that both frightened and thrilled her. The strength in his hands when he worked, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her mare, the way he always removed his hat when he addressed her, a small gesture of respect that touched her more than she wanted to admit. She had loved Peter, had mourned him deeply, but what she was beginning to feel for Mason was different, sharper, like coming alive after a long sleep. It was late October when everything changed. Mason had been staying in the barn loft, sleeping on hay with his bedroll, but a cold snap came through that made Beatrice insist he sleep by the fireplace in the house instead. He protested at first, worried about propriety, but she fixed him with a stern look and said, "Mason Cole, I am not letting you freeze to death in my barn out of some misplaced sense of decorum. People in town can think what they like." So he moved his bedroll inside, and the house felt smaller somehow, more intimate with both of them under the same roof. That first night, Beatrice sat by the fire with her sewing, working on the blue dress, and Mason watched her from where he lay on his blankets. "Why do you keep working on it?" he asked quietly. "The dress." Beatrice's hand stilled. "Because it reminds me that I am more than just surviving," she said. "Every stitch is an act of faith that maybe, someday, things could be different, better. Even if I never wear it, I made something beautiful with my own hands." "That means something." Mason sat up, his blanket falling away from his shoulders. "Beatrice," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion, "you deserve to wear that dress. You deserve to go to fancy balls and dance and have beautiful things. You deserve more than just surviving." She looked at him across the firelight, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And who is going to give me those things, Mason? I am a widow with debts and a failing homestead in the middle of nowhere. That is my reality." "It does not have to be," he said, getting to his feet and crossing the small space between them. He knelt in front of her chair, looking up into her face. "Beatrice, I know I am just a drifter, a cowboy with nothing to my name but a horse and a saddle, but I could be more. I could stay. I could help you make this place work. I could give you a reason to wear that dress." Her breath caught. "Mason, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I have feelings for you," he said, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "I have been falling for you since the moment I saw you with that dress in your lap, and I cannot keep pretending otherwise. I am saying that if you will have me, I want to stay. Not as hired help, but as your husband, your partner, your future." Beatrice's hand came up to cover her mouth, tears spilling over now. "I have feelings for you too," she whispered. "But Mason, I am afraid. I lost Peter so suddenly. What if I lose you too? You might," he said honestly, reaching up to take her free hand in both of his. "There are no guarantees in this life. But we could have years together, decades maybe. We could build something real. And even if we only get a short time, would not that be better than never taking the chance at all?" She was quiet for a long moment, and Mason felt his heart hammering in his chest, waiting. Then Beatrice set down her sewing and slid out of the chair to kneel on the floor with him, her hands coming up to cup his face. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you." Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her close, feeling the way she trembled against him. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her, soap and wood smoke, and something essentially Beatrice. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I will spend every day trying." "You already make me happy," she said, pulling back just enough to look at him. "You make me feel alive again." He kissed her then, soft and careful, a question and an answer all at once. Beatrice responded with a small sound of surprise and pleasure, her arms coming around his neck, and the kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and hopeful and full of promise. They planned to marry quickly, with no engagement period to observe beyond what propriety absolutely demanded. Beatrice had been a widow long enough that the town would not judge her too harshly, and Mason was eager to make their union official. They went into Sierra City together on a bright November morning and spoke to the circuit preacher who came through town twice a month. Reverend Walsh was an old man with kind eyes who listened to their story and agreed to marry them the following Sunday. "Young man," he said to Mason, "you understand you are taking on not just a wife, but a homestead with debts and obligations." "I understand," Mason said firmly. "And I am ready for it." The Reverend turned to Beatrice. "And you, Mrs. Turner, are you certain you are ready to marry again? There is no shame in waiting longer if you need more time to grieve." Beatrice took Mason's hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I will always carry Peter in my heart," she said quietly, "but I am ready to live again, and I want to live with Mason." The wedding took place on a cold Sunday in mid-November, with a handful of townspeople in attendance. Beatrice wore a simple brown dress, her best one, with her hair arranged in careful curls. Mason had purchased a new shirt with some of his saved wages, and he stood at the front of the small church, feeling more nervous than he had ever felt facing down wild horses or angry bulls. But when Beatrice walked down the aisle toward him, her face glowing with joy, all his nervousness melted away. This was right. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting. Not a place, but a person. Not a destination, but a home. They spoke their vows clearly, their voices steady, and when Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, Mason kissed Beatrice with all the tenderness and passion he had been holding back. The small congregation applauded, and they walked back down the aisle together, Mr. and Mrs. Cole now, ready to face whatever came next. The winter that followed was hard but happy. Mason worked at the lumber mill to earn money for supplies and to pay down Beatrice's debts. He proved himself a skilled and reliable worker, and the wages were steady if not generous. Beatrice continued to take in sewing work from the townswomen, her skill with a needle making her valuable despite her modest circumstances. But the best moments were the quiet ones at home. Mason would come in from work to find supper waiting and Beatrice smiling at him from the kitchen. They would eat together and talk about their days, and then spend the evenings by the fire, Beatrice with her sewing and Mason often reading aloud from whatever books they could borrow. Sometimes he would convince her to set down her work and dance with him, humming a tune he remembered from his childhood while they moved around the small room, laughing at their own clumsiness. "I am a terrible dancer," Beatrice protested one night, stepping on his foot for the third time. "Then we will practice until you are a good dancer," Mason said, spinning her gently. "Because one day I am going to take you to San Francisco, and you are going to wear that blue dress, and we are going to dance at a real ball." Beatrice stopped moving and looked up at him, her expression serious. "Mason, you do not have to promise me things like that. I am happy with what we have." "I know you are," he said, pulling her close, "but I want to give you more. I want to give you everything." "You already have," she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him. As winter deepened into January and February, Mason began making inquiries about land further up in the mountains. There was good timber up there, and if they could purchase a claim, they could start their own small logging operation. It would be hard work, backbreaking even, but the potential profits were significant. He shared his ideas with Beatrice one night, laying out his plans and his hopes. "It is a risk," he admitted. "We would have to take on some debt to get started, buy equipment, and hire a few men. But if we work hard and we are careful, I think we could make a real success of it. In a few years, we could be comfortable. More than comfortable." Beatrice listened carefully, asking questions and offering suggestions. She had a good head for numbers, better than his, and she helped him refine his plans, pointing out potential pitfalls and opportunities he had not considered. By the time they went to bed that night, they had the skeleton of a real business plan. "Are you sure you want to take this risk?" Mason asked as they lay together in the darkness. "It could fail. We could lose everything." Beatrice turned to him, her hand finding his. "We could," she agreed. "But we could also succeed. And either way, we will be together. That is what matters." Spring came early that year, melting the snow and turning the mountain streams into roaring torrents. Mason and Beatrice used their combined savings to purchase a timber claim up in the high country, 100 acres of prime forest. They hired 2 young men from town, brothers named Samuel and Thomas Whitaker, who were strong workers and eager to learn. The work was grueling. They were up before dawn and worked until dark, felling trees, trimming logs, and hauling them down to the staging area where they would be collected by the mill. Mason came home each night exhausted, his muscles aching, but there was a satisfaction in it, a sense of building something real. Beatrice kept the books and managed the finances, and on the days when the men did not need her cooking for their midday meal, she continued her sewing work. The blue dress sat in the corner of their bedroom, nearly finished now, a reminder of where they had started and where they were going. By summer, their operation was showing real promise. They had paid back their initial loan and were starting to see actual profit. Mason was able to hire 2 more men, expanding their capacity, and Beatrice began talking about improvements they could make to the house, maybe even building a larger place eventually. But it was not all smooth progress. In July, one of the men was injured when a log shifted unexpectedly, crushing his leg. Mason and the others got him down the mountain to the doctor in town, and while the man survived, he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Mason visited him every day during his recovery, bringing wages and assurances that he would have work once he healed, and the incident sobered him to the real dangers of their profession. "I could lose you to this work," Beatrice said one night, her voice tight with worry, "just like I lost Peter." Mason held her close, understanding her fear. "You could," he said honestly, "but Beatrice, I am careful. I do not take unnecessary risks, and we need this income if we are going to build the life we want." "I know," she whispered. "I just get scared sometimes." "So do I," he admitted. "But we have each other, and that gives me a reason to be careful, to come home safe every night." As fall approached, marking a full year since Mason had first ridden up to Beatrice's door, their fortunes continued to improve. The logging operation was thriving, and they had saved enough money that Mason felt comfortable making good on his promise. One evening in late September, he came home with a mysterious smile and told Beatrice to finish the blue dress. "Why?" she asked, confused. "Because in 2 weeks we are going to San Francisco," he announced. "I have booked us rooms at a hotel, and I have learned that there is a harvest ball at one of the big hotels, open to anyone who can afford the admission, which we can. So you are going to finish that dress, and we are going to go to that ball, and you are going to dance until your feet hurt." Beatrice stared at him, her eyes wide. "Mason, are you serious?" "Completely serious," he said, grinning. "You said a girl can dream. Well, I am going to make that dream come true." She threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. "I cannot believe you did this," she said. "I cannot believe we are really going." "Believe it," Mason said, kissing her soundly. "You deserve this, Beatrice. You deserve beautiful things." The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Beatrice finished the blue dress, adding final embellishments and making sure every seam was perfect. She also made Mason a proper suit, working late into the night by lamplight, determined that he would look as fine as any gentleman in San Francisco. Mason arranged for the Whitaker brothers to manage the logging operation in their absence and made sure all their affairs were in order. The journey to San Francisco took 2 days by stage, and Beatrice spent much of it pressed to the window, watching the landscape change from mountain forests to rolling hills to the sprawling Bay City. She had never seen anything like it, the crowds and buildings and general bustle of urban life, and Mason delighted in her wonder. Their hotel was modest but respectable, and after they checked in and cleaned up from the journey, they had a day to explore the city before the ball. Mason took Beatrice to restaurants and shops, bought her a pair of white gloves and a fan to go with her dress, and generally treated her like a queen. They walked along the waterfront, watching ships come and go, and Beatrice held Mason's arm tight, feeling like she had stepped into a different world. The night of the ball, Beatrice stood in front of the mirror in their hotel room and hardly recognized herself. The blue dress fit perfectly, the color bringing out her eyes, and with her hair arranged in an elegant style, and the borrowed jewelry Mason had surprised her with. She looked like one of the fine ladies she had always imagined. "You are beautiful," Mason said from behind her, and when she turned, she saw that he was equally transformed in his new suit, his dark hair combed back, looking every inch a gentleman despite his calloused hands and sun-weathered face. "So are you," she said, and meant it. The ballroom took Beatrice's breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting glittering light over the polished floor. Women in gorgeous gowns swirled past with their partners, and an orchestra played music so beautiful it made her heart ache. Mason led her onto the floor, his hand on her waist, and they began to dance. Beatrice stumbled at first, nervous and overwhelmed, but Mason steadied her with a smile. "Remember our practice," he murmured. "Just follow my lead." And she did. As the music washed over them and they moved together across the floor, Beatrice felt something release inside her, some tight knot of fear and limitation that she had been carrying for years. She was not just surviving anymore. She was living, truly living, and it was better than any dream. They danced for hours that night, taking breaks only to drink punch and catch their breath. Mason proved surprisingly skilled, his natural grace with horses and rope translating to the dance floor, and Beatrice found herself laughing with pure joy. Several other couples complimented her dress, asking which seamstress had made it, and she proudly announced that she had made it herself. As midnight approached and the ball began to wind down, Mason led Beatrice out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air was refreshing after the warmth of the ballroom, and they stood together, looking out at the lights spread below them. "Thank you," Beatrice said softly, "for all of this, for making my dream come true." Mason turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Beatrice, this is just the beginning. We are going to have so many more nights like this, so many more dreams come true, I promise you that." "I already have everything I need," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "I have you, and I have you," he replied, kissing her tenderly. "My beautiful wife who can dream and make those dreams into reality with her own hands. I am the luckiest man alive." They stayed in San Francisco for another 2 days, making the most of their time away from the mountains and their work. But as much as Beatrice enjoyed the city, she found herself eager to return home. The house that she had once seen as just a reminder of loss and hardship now felt like a sanctuary, a place where she and Mason were building their future together. The journey back was comfortable and easy, both of them relaxed and happy, and when they finally arrived in Sierra City and made their way to their property, Beatrice felt a rush of affection for the modest house with its patched roof and sturdy fences. "Home," she said softly as Mason helped her down from the wagon. "Home," he agreed, pulling her close. The years that followed were good ones. Their logging operation continued to prosper, and by their 3rd anniversary, they had paid off all debts and had saved enough to start building a larger house on a piece of land they purchased adjacent to their original claim. Mason designed it himself, with input from Beatrice, and they spent weekends and evenings working on it together, slowly raising walls and a roof. In the spring of 1882, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with joy and a touch of anxiety, Mason worrying about the dangers of childbirth, and Beatrice worrying about being a good mother. But they supported each other through the long months of waiting, Mason becoming even more protective and Beatrice growing more confident as she felt the baby move inside her. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby boy with a powerful cry and his father's dark hair. They named him Peter James Cole, honoring both Beatrice's first husband and Mason's father. Mason held his son with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face, and Beatrice watched them with a heart so full she thought it might burst. "He is perfect," Mason whispered. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." Motherhood came naturally to Beatrice, and she balanced caring for Peter with her sewing work and keeping the accounts for their business. Mason was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son, and as the baby grew into a toddler, he proved to be a happy, energetic child who loved being outdoors with his father. By 1884, their new house was finished, a spacious two-story building with proper bedrooms and a large kitchen. They moved in with great excitement, Beatrice already imagining how they would fill the extra rooms. Her wish came true sooner than expected when she became pregnant again, and in the fall of 1885, they welcomed twin daughters, Rose Marie and Ruby Ann. The twins were a handful, two red-faced bundles of energy who took turns keeping their parents awake at night, but Mason and Beatrice had never been happier. Their home was filled with love and laughter, and though they were often exhausted, they would not have changed a thing. As the children grew, Mason began teaching Peter about the logging business, taking him up to the timber claim on weekends to show him how the operation worked. The boy was bright and eager to learn, and Mason felt pride swell in his chest every time Peter asked an intelligent question or showed interest in the work. Beatrice, meanwhile, taught the twins to sew, and Rose in particular showed real aptitude for it. The little girl would sit for hours with scraps of fabric, creating tiny dresses for her cloth dolls, and Beatrice encouraged her, remembering how her own mother had encouraged her. In the summer of 1887, nearly 9 years after Mason had first ridden up to Beatrice's door, they decided to make another trip to San Francisco. This time they brought the children, now 5-year-old Peter and 2-year-old Rose and Ruby. The journey was more chaotic with 3 small children, but it was also full of joy as the youngsters marveled at everything they saw. There was no ball this time, but Mason and Beatrice took the children to the park and to see the ships in the harbor, and one evening they hired a sitter and went to a nice restaurant together, just the two of them. Beatrice wore the blue dress again, though it fit a bit differently now after 2 pregnancies, and Mason wore his suit, which they had carefully preserved over the years. "You remember the first time we came here?" Beatrice asked over dinner, her eyes soft with memory. "The night I wore this dress for the first time. I remember every detail," Mason said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I remember thinking that I was the luckiest man in that ballroom. I still think that." "I was so afraid back then," Beatrice said quietly. "Afraid of losing you, afraid of hoping for too much, afraid that my dreams were foolish." "And now?" Mason asked. "Now I know that dreams are not foolish," she said, smiling. "Dreams are what keep us alive. And you taught me that it is okay to dream big because sometimes if you work hard and love deeply, those dreams come true." Mason raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I had dreams too, you know. Dreams of finding a place to belong, a family to love, a reason to stop drifting." And I found all of that with you." They returned to Sierra City renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Their business continued to thrive, and as Peter grew older, he became more involved in the operations, showing real leadership potential. Mason began to think about the legacy he was building, not just a business but a way of life that he could pass on to his children. By 1890, Peter was 12 and already working part-time at the logging operation during summers. The twins were 7 and full of personality, Rose still devoted to sewing and Ruby showing a talent for numbers that rivaled her mother's. Mason and Beatrice had added a 4th child to their family, another son named Thomas William, and though their household was loud and chaotic, it was also full of love. One evening, after the children were in bed, Mason found Beatrice in their room, taking the blue dress out of the wardrobe where it hung in a protective cloth cover. She held it up, looking at it with a thoughtful expression. "I was thinking," she said, turning to Mason, "that maybe when Rose is old enough I could alter this for her. Pass it on. It has been such a symbol of dreams and hope for me, and I would like her to have it." Mason came to stand beside her, looking at the dress that had been part of their story from the very beginning. "That is a beautiful idea," he said. "Though knowing you, you will probably make her an even better one." Beatrice laughed. "Maybe, but this one is special. This one brought us together." "You brought us together," Mason corrected, putting his arms around her from behind. "Your courage, your willingness to dream, your faith that life could be better. The dress was just fabric and thread. You are what made it magical." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that still held the same mixture of strength and vulnerability that had captured his heart years ago. "We made it magical together," she said. "You and me, partners in everything." "Partners in everything," he agreed, kissing her with all the love and passion that had only deepened over the years. As the 1890s progressed, the Cole family became one of the most respected in Sierra City. Their logging operation was known for fair wages and safe working conditions, and both Mason and Beatrice were active in community affairs. Beatrice's sewing had evolved into a small but successful dressmaking business, and women came from miles around for her work. Peter grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, but with his mother's thoughtful nature. The twins developed into lovely young ladies, Rose pursuing her mother's passion for sewing and Ruby showing interest in business and commerce. Thomas grew up surrounded by love and the example of his hard-working parents and older siblings. In the spring of 1895, on their 16th wedding anniversary, Mason surprised Beatrice with a gift. He led her out to a newly cleared section of their property, where a small gazebo had been built, white-painted and elegant with a view of the mountains they both loved. "What is this?" Beatrice asked, delighted. "This," Mason said, "is your own personal ballroom. So that anytime you want to dance, anytime you want to remember that first night in San Francisco, we can come here. Just you and me." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "Mason Cole, after all these years, you can still surprise me." "I hope to surprise you for many more years to come," he said, leading her up into the gazebo. There was no music, but he took her in his arms anyway, and they began to dance, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. As they swayed together in the mountain air, Beatrice thought about the girl she had been when Mason first rode up to her door, alone and grieving and barely surviving. She thought about the blue dress that had represented impossible dreams, and the cowboy who had helped her believe those dreams could come true. And she thought about everything they had built together, the family and the business and the love that had sustained them through hard times and good. "What are you thinking about?" Mason asked softly, seeing the faraway look in her eyes. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Beatrice said. "How grateful I am that you came to my door that day. How grateful I am that you saw past the struggling widow to the woman who still had dreams. How grateful I am for every moment we have shared." "I am the grateful one," Mason insisted. "You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Beatrice said, and rose on her toes to kiss him. They stayed in the gazebo until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Their children called them in for supper eventually, voices carrying across the property, and they walked back to the house hand in hand, partners in everything, just as they had promised each other so many years ago. The blue dress still hung in Beatrice's wardrobe, preserved with love and care, a testament to the power of dreams and the cowboy who had helped make them come true. And though there were many more years ahead of them, many more challenges to face and joys to share, in that moment, walking toward their home with their family waiting inside, both Mason and Beatrice knew that they had already found everything they had been searching for. They had found each other, and in doing so had found their way home,